Hey there, I'm here to go over the preterite tense with you all and also to review the tenses that we've already learned and how to differentiate between them. So let's start with the basics and remind ourselves of the present tense. We use the present tense for generally true statements like the sky is blue, he is tall, stuff like that. Or for things that happen regularly, like I go to school every day. Yo voy a la escuela todos los días. Or the teacher teaches and the students learn. That's just something that happens. We use present tense for that. Or we can also use present tense for things that are taking place right now. For example, I am happy or she is tired. We would use the present tense for those. In the present tense, as you can see, we have the regular verbs for AR, ER, and IR. We have the endings listed there. When we're using a regular AR, ER, or IR verb, we take off that ending, the AR, ER, or IR, and we replace those two letters with one of the endings that you see here, depending on who's performing the action. And of course, we have our irregular verbs, for example, ir, ser, and estar, which kind of follow their own rules. Now, when we look at the present tense, we have to remind ourselves that this is not necessarily for things that are happening specifically in the moment. For that, we use the present progressive tense. The present progressive tense has two components. We use the verb estar, and then we use what's called a gerund, which is the ing form of a word. So rather than saying she learns Spanish every day, we want to say she is learning Spanish, or I am talking, you are listening, right? That ing form of the verb is what we're looking for here. So we start off with a form of estar, which gives us the I am, you are, he is part, and then we're going to form the gerund by changing out the ending of the verb, that AR, ER, or IR, and exchanging it for either ando or iendo. And then next we get to the preterite tense. We use the preterite tense for actions that have been completed in the past with a specific start and end time, or at least a clear beginning and end to the action. So for example, if I want to say that I went to my grandparents' house last week, I could use the preterite for that. But if I wanted to say that when I was younger, I used to go to my grandparents' house all the time, that still is in the past, but it doesn't have a specific end or start time. We don't know for how long I went to my grandparents' house, when that started or when it ended, so we couldn't use preterite there. Again, preterite is used for specific completed actions in the past. Now, for the regular preterite tense verbs, we will change out the AR ending for the endings you see here, and then on the right side you can change out the ER or IR ending for the endings that you see there. Again, these are for the regular preterite verbs. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of practice here. We're going to go ahead and take some example sentences and translate them. So if I want to say I talked, then as you all know, the yo would be optional. But instead of taking hablar and leaving the AR ending, I'm going to exchange it for the given ending. So hablé means I talked in the past tense. If I want to say you ate, again, the you, the tú, is optional. And then for the verb comer, instead of saying comer, I'm going to take out that ER and exchange it for the tú form ending of an ER verb, which is iste, tú comiste. And then we want to move to she lived. For she lived, we're using the verb vivir. And instead of keeping that IR at the end, we're changing it out for the ending that would match the he, she, usted form, which is an I and then an O with an accent mark. So, yo hablé, tú comiste, ella vivió. And those are preterite verbs. Now then we have to ask ourselves, how can we use the preterite tense if a verb is reflexive? So let's do a little bit of practice here. If I wanted to say that I washed myself, the verb we're going to be using is lavarse. Of course, like normal, the yo is optional, but because this is a reflexive verb, I have to have my reflexive pronoun. And then the verb lavar, I conjugate like normal, and instead of that AR ending, I'll change it out for an E with an accent mark. Me lavé. It likes to autocorrect me, but I was right the first time. So, I washed myself, right? The lave means I washed, the me means myself. And then if we wanted to say that you all washed yourselves, ustedes, again, we still need our reflexive pronoun first. That pronoun would be se. And then for lavar, we will take the first part of the verb, get rid of the ending, and change it out for the ustedes ending for an AR verb, which is aron. Ustedes se lavaron. You all washed yourselves. So, in the case of reflexive verbs, we still conjugate the verbs following the conjugation endings that you see above, and we still have to have a reflexive pronoun, so we put those out in front just like we always have. The next thing to consider is, what about stem changing verbs? So let's look at an example here. We have the verb almorzar, which is to eat lunch. So we want to start with he eats lunch. In the present tense, he eats lunch. That would be él almuerza, right? Almorzar has a stem change from O to UE in the present tense. But in the preterite tense, we actually don't have to worry about that. So we start off with él, and then we're going to take the beginning of our verb, almorz, and then instead of the AR, we're going to just give our regular ending there, almorzó. Él almorzó. He ate lunch. So the good news is we do not have to worry about stem changes, regular stem changes in the preterite tense. Now, of course, we do have irregular verbs. You all remember that in the present tense, we had a whole sheet of irregular verbs, right? So in preterite, of course, we will have more irregular verbs too. If you're looking for your important notes packet, on the 3rd and 4th pages, it has all the preterite conjugations you will ever need. So the front of that page has the regular endings, and if you flip to the back of that sheet of paper, it has a bunch of irregular verbs. And in kind of the top middle section of the paper, you'll see the verbs ir and ser. Now, these are separate verbs because ir means to go and ser means to be. But in the preterite tense, they are conjugated the exact same way. Now, I know that sounds like it can be tricky, but the truth is context actually makes it pretty easy. So let's take a look. If the sentence that we have says, yo fui a la fiesta, right? We know that fui is in the past tense, and we know that it's either coming from ir or ser. If it were coming from the verb ir, it would be saying, I went, right? Ir means to go, so I went to the party. If it were coming from the verb ser, the sentence would be saying, I was to the party. And we know that doesn't make sense, so we actually don't have to worry about it. The context tells us that version of fui is coming from the verb ir, I went to the party. Another example, if I say, ayer fue domingo, right? Yesterday blank Sunday. Our options here can be that fue was coming from the verb ir, which would mean yesterday went Sunday, or fue could be coming from the verb ser, which would mean yesterday was Sunday. So either way, context here lets you know which verb it is. But this is the first irregular set of conjugations that we'll be focusing on. So for your assignments this week, you all will be looking at the regular AR, ER, and IR endings, and you'll be looking at the verbs ir and ser. But that's it for this week. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can use these verbs in a variety of tenses. Let's start with the verb jugar. Jugar means to play. So if I wanted to say, I am going to play, we know that even though going sounds like that ing, this is not happening right now, so we aren't going to use the present progressive tense. Instead, we're going to be using the future tense. So our yo is optional here, and we're going to use our Mark Anthony setup, voy a jugar. Ir plus a plus an infinitive verb, voy a jugar. Now, if I wanted to say that I play, like I play soccer every day, again, the yo is optional, and then I would just say juego. Remember, the verb jugar has a stem change in the present tense, juego. If I wanted to say that I am playing, then we would be using the present progressive tense because it's currently happening. I would say estoy jugando. And again, we do not have a stem change in the present progressive tense in the gerund, that ing form, so we don't have to worry about. And then let's switch it up here. Let's say you played. Again, the tú here is optional, but if we wanted to say you played, jugaste. We do not have a stem change there to worry about in the preterite tense either. All right, let's go ahead and do one more verb. Despertarse means to wake oneself up. We'll say she wakes herself. Ella se despierta. That's present tense. We have a stem change there. If I wanted to say that we are waking ourselves, then we have our optional nosotros to start. We do have to have a reflexive pronoun again. Nos estamos despertando. We are waking ourselves. No stem change to worry about. Then let's say I woke myself up. Again, the yo is optional. We have to have our reflexive pronoun though. We do not have to worry about a stem changing verb. And then we put in our preterite ending. And finally, let's look at a version here with an infinitive. So let's say I have to wake myself up. So we know anything that we have to do has this basic setup, right? We have tener plus que plus an infinitive verb. In this case, let's go ahead and put our reflexive pronoun out front, right? We have to say I have to wake myself, so we have to have the may in there somewhere. Our other option would be to connect the may to the end of our infinitive verb. I have to wake myself. Tengo que despertarme. So we have options there when we have the infinitive verb. But regardless, you all are now able to use verbs in a variety of ways, and it gives you a lot of versatility with the way that you can speak. So make sure that if you have any questions, you email me and let me know, and you are absolutely allowed to use your notes. You can ask your seat buddy if you need help with something, but generally you should be able to do this individually. Thanks so much. Let me know if you need anything.